Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to get into something truly wild.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's about how our own minds, just by the power of our beliefs and expectations, can actually shape the reality we experience. We're calling it expectation effects. And the more we dug into the research, the more it seems like this touches on just about everything.
It really does. It's like these invisible forces influencing whether we get sick or not.
Yeah, or how easily we give in to temptation, how well we sleep.
How we age, how well we perform under pressure, you name it.
All of that.
There's probably an expectation effect involved.
We've got a lot of material to get through today. We've got books, scientific studies, real-world examples, personal anecdotes.
It's going to be a deep dive.
Oh, it's going to be a deep dive for sure. So to kick things off, let's just jump right into one of the most eye-opening studies that really got us thinking. This was from Harvard, and they looked at hotel cleaners.
Okay, hotel cleaners.
Yeah, so think about it. These are people doing pretty demanding physical work all day long, but they might not see it as exercise, like going to the gym or for a run. So the researchers just explained to them that, hey, all those tasks you do, vacuuming, making beds, moving furniture, all that adds up, and it actually meets those recommended guidelines for physical activity.
Okay, interesting.
And then a month later, they checked back in, and the cleaners, their work routines hadn't changed at all, but their weight and blood pressure had improved measurably.
Wow, so just changing how they thought about their work, that had a real physical effect on them.
Exactly, and that's just one study.
It kind of makes you wonder what else our minds are doing without us even realizing it.
Right, so imagine how much more profound these expectation effects could be in, say, a life or death situation.
Well, that's where the case of sudden unexpected nocturnal death syndrome, or SENDS, comes in.
Okay, SENDS.
Yeah, back in the late 1970s, there were these clusters of deaths happening among Laotian Hmong immigrants in the United States.
So very specific.
Very specific, yeah. Primarily men in their mid-20s to mid-40s. And what's really eerie is the way it happened. Loved ones would hear them struggling to breathe in the night, maybe a gasp or a cry. And by the time they got to them, it was too late.
It's chilling.
It was.
And to make it even more mysterious, despite all sorts of investigations, no one could figure out a medical reason for these deaths.
Right. They ruled out everything. No signs of poisoning, no unusual diets, no mental health issues. It was really a puzzle.
And at its peak, this SUNDS was the leading cause of death for young Hmong men. It surpassed all the other top causes combined.
Right, and that's when anthropologists started to look beyond the purely medical explanations. Shelley Adler, she suggested that it might be tied to Hmong folklore. They have this strong belief in an evil spirit, this dabsog that comes out at night, lies on you, paralyzes you, and then, well, you die in your sleep.
So we have this deeply rooted cultural belief that's intertwined with a very real and very tragic phenomena. It's a powerful example of how our beliefs, our expectations, even about something like an evil spirit, can manifest in our physical reality.
It really is. And to understand how that's even possible, we have to look at how our brains actually work.
Okay, so what's going on up there?
Well, your brain isn't just passively absorbing information from the world around you. It's constantly building a simulation of what it expects to happen next, and it uses your past experiences and your expectations to fill in the gaps.
Kind of like a prediction machine.
Exactly, a prediction machine. And most of the time it works really well, right? Our predictions match reality pretty closely. But sometimes, things go awry, and those expectations lead to some pretty strange results.
Okay, give us an example.
Well, think about the Gatwick drone incident back in December 2018. A security officer reported seeing 2 drones near the airport, and immediately everyone jumped to the conclusion that it was a terrorist attack.
Yeah, given all the previous incidents and anxieties around drones, it's understandable why they would think that.
Absolutely. But what followed was this massive disruption. They shut down the runway, stranded over 140,000 passengers, canceled over 1,000 flights. It was international news.
Right. And all because of these supposed drones.
Exactly. But here's the thing. They never found anyone responsible. There was a huge reward offered, and no one came forward.
What? So did they just imagine the drones?
Well, no one's saying it was a mass hallucination, but the lack of any clear photographic evidence, and even some within the police force, began to doubt whether there were any drones at all.
So are you saying that maybe a few people saw something, maybe a brief glimpse of something, and then that expectation of a drone attack just amplified everything?
It's a possibility. It really highlights for you how powerful expectations can be, to the point where they might even make us see things that weren't really there.
Okay, that is wild. So what you're saying is sometimes we see what we believe.
Right. Believing is seeing, and it's not just about things like drones.
Right.
Think about that ambiguous black and white image in the book.
Oh, yeah, where at first it's just a jumble of shapes.
Exactly. But then if I tell you it's a picture of a common pet, suddenly your brain goes, aha.
Yeah, and it just clicks into place.
And once you've seen it, that's it. Even if you look at the picture again years later, you'll recognize it immediately.
Like your brain's created this shortcut based on that expectation.
And researchers have shown that you can even hallucinate faces in random patterns of gray dots just by giving people the right suggestion.
So our brains are actively constructing reality based on what we expect to see.
Exactly. And it's not just about vision. There's that study where they told students they might hear white Christmas hidden within white noise.
Okay, so there's no actual music playing.
Nope, just white noise. But almost a third of those students reported hearing the song.
Because they were expecting it.
Because they were expecting it.
Wow. This is all pretty mind-bending stuff. So how does this apply to things beyond these sensory tricks?
Well, let's look at the case of Sarah. She's a young woman who experienced a pretty sudden and significant loss of vision over just a few months. It got so bad that she could barely see just a faint glow around light sources.
Okay, that's terrifying. Do they know what caused it?
That's the thing. Eye specialists examined her thoroughly, and they couldn't find anything physically wrong with her eyes. No medical explanation at all.
So she just went blind for no apparent reason.
It seems that way. And her case highlights the possibility that our expectations, our beliefs, can have a very real impact even on things we typically think of as purely physical.
Like our vision.
Exactly. And this brings us to the concepts of placebo and nocebo effects.
Okay, so most people have heard of the placebo effect, the idea that a sugar pill can make you feel better just because you believe it will.
Right. Placebo literally means I shall please.
But then there's this flip side, the nocebo effect.
Yeah. Nocebo means I will harm. It's when you anticipate a negative outcome, and that expectation itself makes you feel worse.
And these aren't just, imagined symptoms.
No, they can cause real physiological changes, affecting your hormones, your neurotransmitters, all sorts of things.
You actually had a personal experience with this, didn't you? With antidepressant side effects.
Yeah, I did. When I started taking antidepressants, I had this real physical pain, and at first I thought it was just a side effect of the medication itself, but then I learned about the nocebo effect, and it dawned on me that maybe it was my anxiety about the side effects that was actually causing the pain.
Okay, so what did you do?
Well, once I understood that, the pain just went away, even though I kept taking the medication.
So just knowing that it might be a nocebo effect made the pain disappear.
Exactly. And it turns out that a lot of the side effects people report with antidepressants might actually be due to nocebo.
Wow. So if we understand this, could it even help with withdrawal symptoms when you stop taking medication?
Potentially, yeah. Anything where you're anticipating negative effects, nocebo could be at play.
So this is pretty huge. Our beliefs can have a real impact on how our bodies respond to medication.
Absolutely. But it goes beyond just medication.
Okay, so how else does this show up in everyday life?
Well, your beliefs about anxiety, for example.
Okay, anxiety, yeah.
If you believe that anxiety is going to make you freeze up or make you perform poorly, then guess what? It probably will. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So it's not just the anxiety itself, but our beliefs about it that cause the problems.
Exactly. And the same goes for positive expectations. If you believe that anxiety can be helpful, that it can give you energy and focus, then you might actually find that it does.
Interesting. So this all ties back to these self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly. And they can affect so many things: your memory, concentration, how tired you feel, even your creativity. And there's even research suggesting that your beliefs about your own intelligence can actually influence your intellectual abilities.
So you're saying we might be able to think ourselves smarter.
Well, it's not quite that simple, but the idea is that our expectations about our abilities might actually unlock potential that we didn't even realize we had.
Okay, so if we can reframe our beliefs about anxiety, about our own intelligence, what about aging? Can we change how we age just by changing our minds?
There's a growing body of evidence suggesting that we can. People who have positive attitudes about aging tend to be healthier. They're less likely to experience things like hearing loss, frailty, illness, even Alzheimer's disease.
So in a sense, you really are as young as you feel.
In a sense, yeah. Your mindset about aging can have a real impact on your biological clock.
But how do we shift these deeply ingrained beliefs and expectations? I mean, they seem so automatic.
That's the million-dollar question, right? And that's what this book really delves into. We explore this revolutionary idea of the brain as a prediction machine.
Okay, we've talked about that a little bit.
Right, but we go deeper, looking at how it uses both our conscious and unconscious expectations to shape our perception of reality. We'll see how simple interventions, psychological interventions, can actually speed up recovery from surgery. We look at how social contagion can spread these negative expectations and how we can protect ourselves from that. It's really fascinating stuff.
It is. And at the end of each chapter, there are even some practical techniques we can try to harness these expectation effects to our advantage.
Exactly, and the more you practice them, the more effective they become.
Okay, so let's get into some more specifics.
Let's do it.
What about that study with the noise-canceling headphones? That one's a good example of how our beliefs can change our actual experience.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. They gave everyone identical noise-canceling headphones, but they told some people they were a prestigious brand, like 3M, and others that they were a lower-quality product.
So same headphones, different expectations.
Exactly. And then they had them listen to words being played over construction noise, and guess what? The people who thought they had the 3M headphones were significantly better at hearing the words.
Even though the equipment was exactly the same.
Exactly. They expected to hear better, so they did. It's like their belief changed how their brain processed the sound.
So our beliefs can actually influence our senses.
And there's that study by Ellen Langer at Harvard where she used MIT cadets in a flight simulator.
Okay, flight simulator, tell me more.
So they had the cadets take a regular eye test first, and then in the simulator, they had them try to read serial numbers on these approaching planes.
Okay, standard stuff for a pilot.
Right, but the thing is, the size of those numbers, they corresponded to the smallest lines on an eye chart, and Langer found that 40% of the cadets could actually read smaller text in the simulator than they could on the eye test.
Really? So their expectation of having good vision as pilots, that actually made them see better.
It seems that way. And she did other experiments too, like having people do star jumps and then telling them it might improve their vision, and even reversing the order of letters on an eye chart. All of them showed that our beliefs about our vision can actually affect how well we see.
That's amazing. So we've seen how expectations can influence our senses, our experience of pain. What about medical procedures?
Well, there's a lot of renewed interest in the placebo effect in medicine.
Right, we mentioned that earlier.
And a lot of it goes back to Henry Beecher's observations during World War II. He was an anesthesiologist, and he was struck by how many soldiers with these horrific injuries reported very little pain. Some even refused painkillers.
That's hard to imagine.
Right. But Beecher realized that their relief at having survived the battlefield, that sense of euphoria, that was acting like a powerful painkiller. Their interpretation of their situation triggered their body's natural pain-relieving mechanisms.
So their belief that they were safe, that actually reduced their experience of pain.
Exactly, and that's had a huge impact on how we think about medicine.
Okay, so how's that play out in modern medicine?
Well, take the study on stents for angina, for example.
Angina, so that's chest pain from reduced blood flow to the heart, right?
Right, and they compared stents, which are these tiny tubes they insert to open up the blocked arteries, they compared those to a sham surgery.
Okay, so some people got the real stent and others had a procedure that looked like it but didn't actually do anything?
Exactly. And the thing is, both groups showed similar improvements in their ability to do physical activity after the procedure.
So the placebo effect was just as effective as the actual stent.
Well, not quite, but it was a significant factor. And there's this theory that the more we learn about the placebo effect, the more powerful it becomes.
Right, so knowing about it makes it stronger.
That's the idea. In the past, people might have dismissed placebos as all in their head, but now we understand that they have real physiological effects.
So the more we believe in them, the better they work.
It's possible. And there's even research showing that open-label placebos, where people know they're taking a placebo, can be effective. One study with chronic pain patients showed a 30% reduction in pain just from taking a placebo they knew was a placebo.
So the power of belief, even without the deception, can have a real impact.
And some doctors are now intentionally using these positive expectations to improve patient outcomes.
How are they doing that?
Well, there's the SciHeart trial, where they focused on building up patients' expectations before heart procedures. They gave them detailed explanations, optimistic recovery plans, visualization exercises, all to enhance their belief in the benefits of the operation.
And it worked.
The results are promising. And there's another study with iron infusions for anemia where they actually showed patients a graph of how much their fatigue was expected to improve.
So they were priming them with positive expectations.
Exactly. And it worked. Those patients reported significantly less fatigue compared to a control group.
Wow. So it's like we can almost think ourselves healthier.
Well, to a certain extent, yes. But we have to remember that there's also a flip side to this, the nocebo effect.
Right. The I will harm effect.
Exactly. Remember, it's when you believe your body is under threat,
Right.
and that triggers your brain to produce those negative physical changes, even if there's no actual physical cause.
We talked about death by expectation as an extreme example.
Right. But it also shows up in less dramatic ways. Nocebo can worsen allergy symptoms, migraines, back pain, concussion symptoms, even the side effects of medication.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy for feeling bad.
And sometimes it can be really subtle, like in that experiment with the artificial rose.
Oh yeah, the guy with rose cold.
He had this patient who was convinced she was allergic to roses, so he presented her with this incredibly realistic artificial rose. It didn't have any pollen or anything, but just the sight of it triggered her allergy symptoms. She started sneezing, her nose got stuffy, all because she believed it was a real rose.
So her expectation of an allergic reaction actually caused one.
Precisely. And the consequences of these negative expectations can be long-lasting. A study found that heart disease patients who were pessimistic about their recovery were more likely to die over the next decade, regardless of how severe their condition was initially.
So our mindset about our health, it can really have a huge impact on our longevity.
And it's not just our own beliefs, it can be influenced by others too. There's this phenomenon called social contagion, where negative expectations can spread through groups.
Give us an example.
Well, there was this study where they gave students a placebo pill, but they told them it was an anti-anxiety medication.
Okay.
And then they told them about potential side effects like headaches, nausea, dizziness. And sure enough, the students started reporting those side effects, even though they were just taking a sugar pill.
So they picked up the negative expectations from the information they were given?
Exactly. And it can even happen with things like allergies. There's a study where they were giving kids with peanut allergies this oral immunotherapy treatment, and one group of parents was told that if their kids experienced mild side effects, it was actually a good sign, that it meant their immune system was responding.
Interesting.
And the kids whose parents were told that, they had less anxiety and were more likely to complete the treatment.
So framing the side effects as a positive thing actually made a difference.
Exactly. And this all ties into the idea of mass psychogenic illness.
Oh yeah, when lots of people in a group start experiencing the same symptoms, but there's no physical cause.
Right. It's different from psychosomatic illness, where your mental state makes existing symptoms worse. With mass psychogenic illness, it starts in the mind. There's no virus, no bacteria, no toxins. It's purely psychological.
Like those historical cases of people suddenly breaking out into uncontrollable dancing.
Exactly. Or more recently, those videos of teenagers with Tourette's-like tics spreading on social media. It's easy to dismiss these things as all in their head, but the suffering is real for those experiencing it.
Right. It's not that they're faking it. It's that their belief that something's wrong is actually making them feel sick.
And a lot of this has to do with a system in our brains called the mirror neuron system.
Okay, mirror neurons. Tell us more about those.
Well, they're basically these neurons that fire both when we do an action and when we see someone else doing the same action. It's like they're mirroring the behavior.
So if I see you reaching for a cup of coffee, the same neurons fire in my brain as if I was reaching for it myself.
Exactly. And it's not just actions. They also respond to emotions. So if I see you smile, the same neurons that fire when I smile, they also fire in my brain.
So we're literally mirroring each other's experiences at a neural level.
And that helps explain how things like expectations and even symptoms can spread through groups. We're picking up on each other's cues, both conscious and unconscious, and incorporating them into our own reality.
So that explains things like mass hysteria. What about those reports of Havana syndrome, those diplomats experiencing all those strange symptoms?
Yeah, headaches, dizziness, cognitive problems. The symptoms are very similar to nocebo effects, and given the high-stress environment they were in, the close-knit community, it's possible that social contagion played a role. Someone starts experiencing symptoms, maybe due to stress or some other unknown factor, and then others, seeing that and being in the same environment, start experiencing similar symptoms.
So their expectations, amplified by the social context, could have contributed to those symptoms.
It's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so we've got this nocebo effect that can make us feel sick even when there's no physical cause.
Yeah.
How does this play out with things like vaccinations?
Well, take the flu vaccine, for example. The injected version, it can't actually give you the flu because it uses either an inactivated virus or just a single protein from the virus.
Right, so it can't replicate and infect you.
Exactly. But in clinical trials, you often see people in the placebo group reporting flu-like symptoms at the same rate as those who got the actual vaccine.
Because they're expecting to feel sick.
Because they're expecting to feel sick. And when doctors warn about side effects, or you hear about it from friends or on social media, that can actually increase the likelihood of experiencing those symptoms.
So our beliefs can influence our response to vaccines. What about medications?
Same thing.
Yeah.
There was all this concern about statins causing muscle pain, and that got a lot of media attention.
Statins, those are the cholesterol-lowering drugs, right?
Right. And this fear of muscle pain, it spread, and people started reporting it more, even though studies show that the rate of muscle pain in people taking statins is almost the same as in people taking a placebo.
So again, the expectation of a side effect makes it more likely to happen.
Exactly. And we see this with food sensitivities, too. There's been this huge increase in people claiming to have gluten sensitivity.
Right, everyone's going gluten-free these days.
And while celiac disease and wheat allergy are real conditions, they only affect a small percentage of people. But studies on self-reported gluten sensitivity show that many of those people are actually reacting to the placebo as well.
So they think gluten is making them sick, so it does, even if they're not actually sensitive to it.
It seems that way, and this constant media focus on the dangers of certain foods, it might be contributing to this nocebo effect. We're being primed to expect negative reactions, and that influences our experience.
It's almost like our minds can create physical symptoms.
In a way, yes. And this brings us to the fascinating area of physical limits and fatigue.
Okay, so how do expectations play a role in how tired we feel?
Well, for a long time, we thought fatigue was just a purely physical thing. You know, your muscles run out of energy, lactic acid builds up, and you get tired.
Makes sense.
But now research is showing that our brains play a much bigger role than we thought. Your brain's acting like a prediction machine, estimating your body's limits based on your past experiences, your mood, your mental state, all sorts of things.
So our brains are setting limits on our physical performance.
In a way, yes. It's like your brain's putting the brakes on to prevent you from overexerting yourself.
But that means we might be capable of more than we realize.
Exactly. There's this study where they had cyclists do a mentally demanding task before cycling, and those who did the mental task actually had less stamina.
So thinking hard made them physically weaker.
It seems that way. And this new understanding has implications for how we think about things like placebo treatments in sports.
Okay, placebo treatments in sports. Explain that one.
Well, if our brains are setting these limits, then placebos might work by changing our perception of those limits.
Give me an example.
Well, there's a famous case of Richard Virenque, the cyclist who was caught doping, but he claimed he was only taking this magic potion that turned out to be sugar water.
Okay.
Now, obviously, sugar water isn't going to enhance your performance directly, but his belief in it, the ritual of the injection, that might have actually changed his brain's perception of his limits, allowing him to push harder.
Interesting. So the placebo effect could give athletes a psychological edge.
And studies on caffeine show that you get a bigger performance boost if you know you're taking caffeine compared to if you think you're taking a placebo.
So the expectation of a benefit enhances the actual benefit.
Exactly. And there's even evidence that placebos might contribute to the effectiveness of banned performance-enhancing drugs.
So some of the benefits of steroids or EPO, that could be a placebo effect.
It's possible. One study showed that runners who thought they were getting an EPO-like substance actually ran faster, even though they were just getting a saline injection.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So if our mindset can have that much of an impact on our physical performance, what are some things we can do to improve our own, without resorting to drugs or placebos?
Well, there are these techniques called reappraisal technique.
Reappraisal, okay, what's that?
It's basically changing how you think about the sensations you're experiencing during exercise.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of focusing on how tired you feel, you might focus on the feeling of being energized afterwards. Or instead of thinking about how much your muscles are burning, you might tell yourself that it's a sign that you're getting stronger.
So it's all about reframing the experience.
Exactly. You're not denying the sensations, you're just changing how you interpret them.
Interesting. And what about all those everyday activities that we might not even think of as exercise?
Right. Well, there's this system called MUTES, which stands for metabolic equivalence.
Okay.
And it's a way to measure the intensity of different activities. And it turns out that lots of things we do every day actually meet the criteria for moderate or vigorous exercise.
Like what?
Things like gardening, housework, dancing, even just walking briskly can count as moderate exercise.
So we might be getting more exercise than we realize.
Exactly. And then there's mental practice, like visualizing yourself exercising. Studies show that this can actually help maintain strength during periods of rest or injury.
So just thinking about working out can make you stronger.
It can help, yeah. And there's anecdotal evidence that in extreme situations, like when a parent needs to lift a car to save their child, we might be able to tap into this hidden strength that we didn't even know we had.
It's like our beliefs about our limitations, they can actually hold us back physically.
Exactly. Our minds are incredibly powerful. And now let's shift gears and talk about appetite and our relationship with food. The case of HM is a fascinating example.
HM, remind me who that is.
He was a patient who had severe memory impairment.
Well, all right.
And what's interesting is that he rarely reported feeling hungry, but he was always ready to eat.
So he didn't know when he was full.
It seems that way. Researchers found that his self-reported fullness levels didn't change before or after meals. It suggests that our memory of having eaten plays a big role in how full we feel.
So it's not just about the signals from our stomachs. It's also about our brains remembering that we've eaten.
Exactly, and even mild forgetfulness can lead to overeating. There's a study where they just reminded people about what they had for lunch, and that reduced their cookie consumption later on by almost half.
Really? Just reminding them.
Yeah, just reminding them. And this leads to the idea of meaning-infused meals.
Meaning-infused meals, okay.
So we know from Pavlov's work that we can associate food with certain cues, and that can trigger physiological responses. Like if you always have a cookie at a certain time of day, just thinking about that time can make you start salivating.
Like a conditioned response.
Exactly. But it goes beyond those simple associations. Our broader beliefs and expectations about food can also influence our digestion and appetite.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, there have been cases of people who thought they had obesity surgery, even though it was just a sham procedure, and they still experienced reduced appetite and weight loss.
So just believing they had the surgery had a real effect on their bodies.
And the way we perceive calories can also be really inaccurate. People who are worse at estimating the calorie content of foods tend to weigh more. And the way food is described can have a big impact on how much we eat and how satisfied we feel.
Like if you describe a dish as skinny-licious or fat-free versus something more indulgent sounding.
Exactly. Those unappealing labels can actually make us feel deprived, while using more evocative language, even for healthy foods, can make them more appealing.
So it's all about presentation.
To a certain extent, yeah. And there's a study where they added the phrase fuller for longer to yogurt labels, and people who ate that yogurt reported feeling fuller.
So just a few words on a label can change how full we feel.
It seems that way. And practicing mindful eating, savoring each bite, really paying attention to the food, that can also help us feel more satisfied and prevent overeating.
So slowing down and being present while we eat.
Exactly. It allows your brain to fully register that you're eating and process those satiety signals. And it's important to remember what you've eaten. That helps prevent mindless snacking later on.
Okay, that makes sense. So our beliefs about food and eating, they can really affect our weight and our health.
And it's not just about individual beliefs. Culture plays a